I think everyone's had the agenda that we're going to be working to this morning, and I'll go through the agenda in where it's printed and it's being proposed. I think we have a number of speakers with us today who I'm not familiar with. The people on the screen, you're going to have to bear with me because I can't actually see your names underneath your photographs. So if you need to speak, if you just indicate in the normal way, we'll pick that up and then we can take it accordingly. Okay, we'll therefore open the meeting. Do we have any apologies for absence, please, or notification of any substitutes?
Yes, Chair, we have a couple of apologies from Councillors Compton and Councillor Boyle. Thank you.
Thank you. Declarations of interest, if any. Members are reminded of the need to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest they have in an item being discussed during the course of the meeting. In addition, the receipt of any gift or hospitality should be declared where the value of the gift was thought to exceed £25. Are there any declarations at this point in time? Don't see any in the room, don't see any hands on the screen, so we'll move forward. We have previously circulated item 4, the minutes of the investment board of the 13th of December. I'm simply taking those for noting, unless anyone's got any corrections they wish to make at this point in time. None indicated. Thank you. We therefore go to items for noting in the business. We'll take the investment programme update. We'll then take questions on the update if there are any, and then we'll take the dashboard elements following the presentation of the report. I'm going to pass over to Ian. I'm going to pass over to Ian Martin for the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the funding commitment as at end of December was 858.5 million, so there's no change on that. That's versus funding available and confirmed interest rate 871 million. This excludes the earmarked contributions approved by CA Board. At March 21, CA Board has agreed to increase the affordable limit to 871 million following a review of future interest rates. Since the last board, WMCA officers have approved 2 requests under delegated authority. These are the playing pitch implementation strategy advanced by Solihull and the accelerating economic delivery project, also known as Simon Digby College, also by Solihull. Neither of these has financial implications that are accounted for in the Solihull programmes approved within the investment programme already. Costs incurred or drawings to the end of the year 21 were 397 million. That's an increase of 23.4 million on the October report, which was the previous report. In August, the board was asked to note that in July, DfT issued guidance in respect to 4.2 billion for transport schemes to be made available nationally and devolved under the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlements, known as CRUS. So CRUS won't form part of the investment programme, but some of the transport projects with partial investment programme funding, where funding is yet to be received from the investment programme, are included in the list of priority projects that have been reviewed by Metropolitan Authorities, TfWM. CRUS funding would allow those the progression of those projects. The original investment programme contained 2.12 billion over 33 projects and programmes, and of this, some 955 million was made up of transport projects, with 78.5 million committed against 32 of those projects. So there is 877 million as yet unfunded, CRUS can play a part in funding some of that. The CRUS award by H&G was 1.05 billion announced in the autumn budget, and the programme of projects has been presented to CA Board in January and approved, subject to DfT ratification, and will be finalised at March CA Board. Additionally, following the recent levelling up white paper published by government, CA intends to review any such options within the proposals which may allow for those schemes beyond the affordable limit to be taken forward.
Thank you. That's the investment programme report. I'll take any questions or points of clarification that people may have, and then we'll move to the dashboards. Are there any comments? The one issue around crusts come to us today with regard to A34 Sprint. There's a paper in the pack which we will go through later on, and that is a combination of funding, including some investment programme funding, but equally some of the cross funding that we've received from government. Any questions? Don't see any. So we do the dashboard then, and then we'll take the recommendations accordingly.
Thank you, Chair. 79 projects have been recorded as having approved funding. Within these, there are various sub-projects, business cases are updated. So we're splitting those out as sub-projects to better record and monitor spend and delivery, and that's how they appear on the dashboard. There are 11 red schemes, which means delays over 6 months or more, and that's on completion only. Those are recorded within the pack, which I can go through individually if you wish, but very briefly, there is UKC related strategy utilities, land value car parking. That currently has a CA assurance and appraisal seeking an update from the project sponsor to initiate a change request. There is a draft change request received by the assurance and appraisal team here at CA for HS2 parallel designs project. That's extending the date for expiry of that. There are various UKC infrastructure projects, 8 projects reporting a red status against approved completion date, with the appraisal and assurance team liaising with Solihull regarding change requests for those. And lastly, the large one being the Coventry City Centre South project, which has an earmarked 98.75 million commitment against that. The spend to date is 13.5 million. This has previously had received an update to CA board about progress from officers at Coventry City Council. The current incumbent developer is bringing on board a funding partner, stroke developer, and they've shortlisted 3 parties at the moment. And as they're moving through their selection process, the board might like to receive an update at the appropriate time.
Before we move to the dashboard, can I declare an interest as a director of the Urban Growth Company, which matters relate to HS2 and car park land values, but non-pecuniary? Councillor Simpkins, please.
It's just in relation to the delays and what the cost will that be. And we've asked this previously about delays, but also there's delay in materials as well because of HS2 and other factors. That is going to be a key factor for cost. I just want to know if there's a backup plan so as these projects can get done, but not be held up any further by additional costs like inflation or materials. Because there's a bit of confidence in the West Midlands at the minute. And what we need to do is keep that momentum. When there's delays that are out of our control, there should be a contingency to see that through, in my opinion.
Please.
Yes, you're absolutely right. We've had discussed it before, so we do review them. The funding agreements put cost overruns at the responsibility of the sponsor, the recipient. So in the case, for example, of HS2 related, UKC related activities, that would be Solihull. So far, there's been good value engineering of projects to make sure that they are deliverable, but it is something that everybody needs to be vigilant about because you're quite right, materials costs have escalated and construction inflation is significant at present.
Yeah, Councillor Simpkins.
Yeah, but if you put the onus then back on the person who's put the application in for funding, that really is going to make them struggle to look for other funding sources. I think we need a broader strategy so we can get all these projects over the line. Must be something that we can take away and come to a consensus where we can find a solution to these problems.
I think the point made is that they are the responsibility of those who made the application. But just on the point, if there's any further funding required through the investment programme or through this board, then we do request a change request from the actual sponsor of the project. So I think our commitment is in essence capped at the levels we've agreed in this board, but obviously if changes are made, then it is the responsibility of the sponsoring organisation. Just on the issue, by the way, which had just been mentioned with regard to the UKC proposal, I obviously have first-hand knowledge of that, and it actually is the case that where funding has not been utilised for one area of the work, a change request has come through here, and we have then allowed that funding to be moved to another part of the contract. I think that would be fair summary. Do you want to add anything?
Yes, I'd also, you're quite right, and we have seen change requests that have reallocated unspent funding. Because sponsors within the council bodies have built in significant contingency into quite a few projects, that has allowed so far for any items where spends exceeded. But not all of the projects that we fund are actually physical anyway. So there's a lot of programs in there that don't have construction costs attached to them, and there's savings sometimes to be made there. It's a difficult field, I acknowledge that.
I think on a more general point, to be helpful, Councillor Simpkins, I think perhaps we do need a paper just to explain the process for evaluation of these contracts as they proceed. I think it might be helpful for the board to have an understanding of how that's dealt with. It's a question that has been raised on a number of occasions. I recognise it's an important one. So we'll ask the officers to bring back some paper to us to explain how these cost changes potentially impact on the investments that we made. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, very much so, Chair. I think it'd be helpful for developers and partners to understand that as well. So we don't want people to walk away. Again, it's really important that we get these schemes and projects delivered. And right, if there's going to be a delay because of out of our control, then we should still be, for the best word, an end of last resort to come back and talk to us. I think it's really important that we do incorporate, developers and local authorities to get these delivered over the line. If we have this paper, there's a clear level playing field for everyone. I think that's most useful. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And the further recommendations come through is that we bring the paper back. On which element did you say with regard to the programme?
We can bring the paper back, as you say, Chair, so we can cover our monitoring evaluation with what happens on cost overruns and including the last resort.
Consensus? Agreed? Yep. Okay, we'll do that. Thank you. We therefore move to, again, items for noting. There are three elements: collective investment fund dashboard, brownfield land and property investment fund, and revolving investment fund. Bearing in mind that these papers also continue into the private part of the agenda, and we're only therefore speaking about those matters that are in the public element of the agenda at this point in time. I'm going to pass to Nick Oakley for any updates he needs to appraise us of. Nick, please.
Thank you, Chair. As you rightly say, items 6, 7 and 8 are the public information dashboards for the WMCA, SIF, RIF and BLPDF funds. These are for noting, and I will provide an update on the WMDC managed funds under private session. I am happy to take any questions if there are any at this point.
Any questions on the public papers? Got indicated, can't see any on the screen. So those are just simply for noting at this point in time. Agreed. We now take a presentation by Coventry, colleagues in Coventry, regarding the City of Culture elements. And you'll have to excuse me, as I said previously, I can't see people's names on the screen. I probably do need a better set of glasses, but at this point in time, you're going to have to bear with me. So if you'd introduce yourselves, I'd appreciate it. I think we've got Charlotte Boothwaite on my list, but maybe not. So perhaps you can just introduce yourselves before you give the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so Charlotte's actually not with us this morning. She was due to be, but can't be with us this morning. So if I just introduce myself and then introduce other members who will be presenting. So I'm David Nuttall. I'm strategic lead for Coventry City Council for UK City of Culture and Commonwealth Games. And also with me are Martin Sutherland and Laura from the Trust. So Martin, just want to introduce yourself and your title and then pass to Laura.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm Martin Sutherland. I'm the Chief Executive of Coventry City of Culture Trust. I'm joined by my colleague, Laura.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Laura McMillan. I'm Director of Audience Strategy for Coventry City of Culture Trust.
Thank you all.
Thank you. So yeah, we've got a presentation with you for you today to just feedback and provide information around the journey since we were with you around the investment decision in UK City of Culture. We've clearly been working with our monitoring officers through this period of time and through a significant period of change for us all. But we want to bring back to you today progress report against all the outcomes that were agreed in the investment picture that's being secured, as well as the activity that's been taking place on the back of the City of Culture title in Coventry. So if I look to put this presentation on screen, it will start with Martin and then move to me. And I think Laura, Martin and I will be happy to take questions at the end. If you can just confirm that. Just start slideshow.
Yeah, we can see the slides.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you,
if
David.
that's showing, I'll make a start.
That's great. Thank you very much. So yes, we are the UK City of Culture, the delayed start, of course. We started back in May 2021 and we run through till the end of May 2022 and are in the thick of planning for our legacy programme at the moment. But I guess just kind of to pause and say, finally, we are the UK City of Culture. We're well and truly underway. David, you want to move on to the next slide, please? So this remains our vision. This was the vision that was established during the bidding process, and COVID didn't derail us. We absolutely were intending to ensure that our cultural activity was going to make an impact above and beyond direct cultural impacts, and was going to hit a whole series of policy areas, whether they be education, skills, health and well-being, civic pride, a whole bunch of other objectives there. That remained the vision. Over this last period, we have been delivering against this. David, next slide, please. So when we negotiated the funding from the Combined Authority, we established a whole series of KPIs. We've always said, though, that we were outcome focused and intended to deliver against 4 longer term impacts, working closely with the Combined Authority and indeed the City Council to ensure that we made the city kind of a fairer, healthier, happier place to be, really. And so on the screen there and in your packs, you'll see some of the KPIs that were established at the negotiation stage for the funding. And I'm pleased to say that as we move on onto the story so far, if you want to move on to the next slide, David, that we've been able to have achieved many of those. So I guess it's worth pausing and recognising that we were the first major cultural event to happen anywhere in the UK since COVID hit our shores, and we have remained committed to delivering major social and economic impact for Coventry, with some impact seen beyond into Warwickshire, indeed into the wider West Midlands so far. We were throughout this whole period been able to remain, say, outcome focused, and to do that we created this structure which sees us working hyper locally in communities, in wards right across the city to ensure that those KPIs that we showed earlier were delivered. If we move on to the next slide, I'll give you a sense of how we, instead of the story in numbers really. So to date, there's been more than 200,000 audience members coming to see events across the city, and more than 250,000 digital engagements. And when we say digital engagements, what we don't mean is that somebody's watched a YouTube advert. What we actually mean is that they've sat down and they've engaged in cultural activity, whether that be a live broadcast, a streaming, a workshop, some form of digital engagement. Clearly, we had to pivot and shift what we were doing during this period, but we're really proud of the massive reach that we've achieved so far through our broadcast and online programme. We also launched our big festival garden site last summer as well, right at the peak of COVID restrictions, and somehow managed to deliver significant audiences, and we'll be bringing back that later this year. Skills has been a massive feature of what we've been doing, and so City hosts our volunteer programme, and there are more than 3,000 individuals recruited to support the programme throughout the whole year. We are, as a trust, we've employed 14 apprentices, we've got 15 cultural leaders, 10 producers, and a whole series of community connectors and international change makers, paid posts, ensuring that skills are being developed in the city which can carry forward into legacy period. Clearly, engaging children and young people very critical in terms of legacy as well. So more than 80% of our schools so far are engaged, and that includes special educational needs schools through to sixth form colleges. And as I said, our work happens right across the city: community centres, family hubs, community radio stations, and indeed libraries. To date, in terms of big numbers, We've secured more than £80 million worth of direct media value. Our target for the year was just over 50 million, so halfway through we've exceeded that target considerably. And of course what we see from all of this work is a significant number of direct but critically indirect jobs, most of those related to the major construction activity that's been happening to get ready for City of Culture, which David will talk a little bit in a little while. If we go on to the next slide, please. So financially, we set a target that we would, for the delivery period, the Trust would have a budget of about £36.4 million. In reality, we've raised about 33 million, clearly kind of challenging times, but we've made considerable success bringing in support from national government, lottery funders, and indeed from trusts and foundations and corporate partners. Corporate partners is less than we had anticipated, but clearly the impact of COVID has been substantial. If we move on to the next slide, this is how we've spent our money. So our budget in the end was curtailed because of less investment than intended, but 32.4 million of direct spend on programme and activity. You see the majority of that goes against programme, and the profile of our spend is pretty much kind of aligned to what we'd intended as part of our original bidding process. But the majority of the expenditure is of course on programme and then in creating the jobs as well. Go to the next slide, please. So we thought it was kind of useful just to kind of maybe give a sense of how some of our activity plays against some of the key policy areas. So as we talk about levelling up, massive amount of our investment. When we talk about programme, we also talk about sector support. So this is the investment in the cultural organisation, grassroots organisations, charity, third sector. So a series of grants programmes, COVID relief funding, business development support work, a huge programme of hospitality training to ensure that businesses could scale up during this period as well, and indeed direct investment into charities to ensure that their beneficiaries were able to engage with the City of Culture opportunities as well. Go to the next slide, please. As mentioned before, legacy will come from our investment in young people, so Kickstarters, apprentices, major hospitality restart programme, and indeed a brilliant programme supported by the British Council, where we see kind of continued development of international exchanges, investment in special educational needs schools, and through an amazing partnership with West Midlands Police, a whole series of activities working with children and young people who are at risk of exploitation, and the development of an Arts Against Violence network as well has been a critical bit of our work to date. Move on, please. While we were investing in grassroots and people maybe at the start of their careers or entering into the cultural sector, we've also been investing massively in a 2-year leadership programme supported by Arts Council England. We've also ensured that those leaders, though, are then able to I guess infiltrate and engage with other arts organisations, cultural organisations, so that this new cohort of diverse leaders are able to share their expertise with other partners, so that the leadership in the city more fairly represents the diversity of our city in the longer term. If we move on, please. We thought we'd just do kind of a quick overview of some of the events for the last period. So in this next period, major focus on local artists, regional artists, including Daniel Lismore. His exhibition opens this week at the Herbert Art Gallery. He's a major kind of fashion icon from Coventry, hasn't ever exhibited in the city, has worked globally, and he's finally coming home during this coming week. We also have commissioned with BBC Radio 3 a whole series of monologues around Middlemarch, George Eliot, and at the end of this month, a major festival curated by young people in the city called the CVX Festival, which is actually a partnership with Birmingham Hippodrome as well. Move on, please. Into March, big showcase on the amazing women in our city, but also this is where we really start to reveal some of our investment in digital and innovation with this alternative reality experience happening at the Fargo Village, some major work up at Warwick Arts Centre, and also our television series with BBC 3 called Skint, which is a series of new dramatic productions will be aired on television during this period as well. That's been a big shift in our programme, is much more towards kind of a broadcast programme as well as a live events programme. If you move on, please. Into April, we welcome back the Assembly Festival Gardens, which is our city centre showground, which will run right through till end of September this year. But also during this period, we've got a big focus on our green spaces and our blue spaces, so the canals, our parks, all they start getting animated during this period as well. And if you move on to the final month, please, David. It's when we open our new digital gallery. This is the UK's first permanent digital immersive gallery, which will be opening in Coventry in May. This is going to be a legacy programme for the City of Culture Trust. And alongside this opening of this gallery, we have 4 massive weekends happening in the city, as we have a big parade of future moves, with a big wildlife gathering, and indeed we work towards the opening of the gallery and indeed the Radio 1 big weekend. Move on, please. In terms of what next steps, the Trust has been undertaking quite a significant amount of activity around legacy planning, and so we're now at the end of phase 3 of our legacy planning, having done major consultation with our partners, the artists, communities and citizens. We then have done detailed work in terms of understanding what might be the opportunities and how we should structure that, and right now we are piecing the jigsaw together. We're undertaking staff reviews, we're raising funds, and we're working with partners to see how they might carry forward what has been started. What essentially has been agreed, though, is the Trust will continue to operate for another 2 years, but will work in a much more delegating manner. So we'll be commissioning and devolving responsibilities to our partners, basically ensuring that the convening power that we've had over this period is then passed into organisations who will then carry legacy forward. The Trust, though, remains committed to delivering its 4 strategic objectives, and we, of course, will align everything we do to the city's cultural strategy and indeed the priorities of bodies such as the Combined Authorities Cultural Leadership Board. We still remain absolutely committed to working right across the city, so on a neighbourhood basis, ward by ward, to ensure that culture remains accessible to all those who wish to engage with it. And for our final 2 years of the Trust, we'll ensure that everything we do has a climate crisis, sustainability, green futures focus as well. If we move on, please. What that means for us in terms of green futures is ensuring that we provide platforms for new stories, we invest in activities that happen in our green and blue spaces, we invest in activities which promote health and well-being, and fundamentally we play our part in shifting behaviour. Arts and culture is an amazing way to change hearts and minds, and we will use this next 2 years to ensure that we contribute towards the climate crisis strategy work that the City Council and the Combined Authority will be doing. Move on, please. And how that works in terms of actuality for legacy is, as I say, we're undertaking a team process right now that will be concluded at the end of March, so we have certainty in terms of our colleagues going forward. But we've already announced a number of projects: the Real Store Digital Gallery, the Assembly Festival Gardens. But unlike previous cities of culture, what we're not going to be doing is then pausing and reflecting and spending 6 months imagining what comes next. We have to be action focused. So from June onwards, our programme continues. We start delivering a number of activities throughout this period, which will be supported by City Council, alignment strategy, and indeed the adoption of a new expert reference group to ensure that everything we're doing is current in terms of climate change thinking. Move on, please.
Sorry, go
on, David. Yeah, well, over to you.
Are you happy for me to continue? Yeah.
Yes, please. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So we also thought it was worth just plugging in the impact that City of Culture has in a location and destination. So clearly the focus investment for this presentation is around the Combined Authority investment in outcomes, as Martin has articulated. But part of that has been a really substantial linked capital programme generated on the back of winning the title. So the initial economic impact report for City of Culture identified at that stage already £172 million of direct investment secured into the city on the back of the title, which includes over £71 million of investment in cultural and heritage assets, 18 million in a new hotel, and over 50 million in the investment in public realm and public spaces. And clearly the Combined Authority has had a clear role to play in that, investing significantly 31.6 million in that complete refocus of our city centre public realm public spaces, which has created a new dynamic and lifted the city centre offer very significantly. Through the support of other partners, including the LEP, DCMS, Arts Council England, National Lottery Heritage Fund, and other trusts and foundation partners. We've also managed to deliver, I think it's now this week, 12 cultural capital projects, so effectively projects across our cultural and arts sector or heritage sector, which has included investment into production space, so bringing the Daimler powerhouse, a former industrial site, into a production space for 5 host companies in the city, which is now creating work that's exported nationally, as well as contributing significantly to our City of Culture year. Investment in Gosford, in the village, in Fargo Village, in the box, and in the spaces of production there, in terms of making spaces and grow on spaces for businesses. It's also enabled us to invest very significantly in our venues. So the Belgrade Theatre has gone through a 3-phase investment programme, including the venue, its ancillary facilities, extending the cafe and creating a standalone access for that arrangement, as well as creating a new production space at the former Jaguar pub, just adjacent to that or near to that. The digital gallery that Martin's already referenced, the first in the UK as a permanent gallery, also enabled investment in the Herbert Art Gallery and Museum in its galleries to enable them to host the Turner Prize, and also bringing a former retail store into being a live music venue with the Coventry HMV Empire, which hosted the Ed Sheeran gig earlier last year. But also aligned to that is also a very significant programme of investment in our heritage assets. And this has been a real joy to see some of these heritage assets brought back into life in the short 3-4 years that we've been working on this programme. So when the title was awarded, there was no capital programme here, but we've seen buildings such as Drapers Hall, which is the building to the top right of that slide, brought back into use as a host venue for our Coventry music, for our young people to learn music, but also a Regency performance venue that stood empty for 30 years before this programme. We've also brought City Gates and Priory Road Cottages back into use as high quality boutique visitor destination accommodation. And we're investing currently in St Mary's Guildhall in a transformational project that will see it come return as a really significant visitor and heritage site in the city. And similarly in Charterhouse and the venue, which is a Carthusian monastery that's being brought back into life as a venue with a high quality restaurant offer and conferencing offer attached to that. So all of this has been enabled by the investment in City of Culture and a focused programme working through the disruption of the last 2 years. We've already delivered 12 projects across our cultural capital investment, plus wider projects with the universities. And have 3 live projects and 2 legacy projects we're already moving into. So really significant impact from City of Culture across our city, the way it looks, the way it feels, and across our assets. And that's the end of our presentation. So very happy for us all to take any questions as required.
Thank you, David. That's really helpful. A couple of points from me, and I may have missed it in your commentary, but on the key KPIs that you've got listed, how has the number of visitors held up? Because clearly COVID has hit us hard. I just wondered how the numbers stacked up at this point in time. And the other thing I was just going to ask you, I mean, first a comment with regards to the public realm. I've been around Coventry on a number of occasions, seeing the investment in public realm, which the combined authority made, and I think it's commendable actually what's being delivered to some really, really interesting stuff. But my final point is, it's really ongoing, how are you going to measure the impacts of the legacy issues? Because I'm not too sure what the KPIs would be in that regard. So if there's any work you've done, and I'm sure your own councillors are very much on top of this, but just for the benefits of this board, if you could just offer us some information, that would be helpful, please.
Do you want to take the visitor question, Martin, and I'll or Laura and I'll pick up the public realm legacy.
Yeah, great. Laura, do you want to come in on the visitors?
Yeah, certainly can. I mean, it's been hugely impacted by the world that we've been living in, but we've been running some numbers around our ticketing data at the moment, and about 54% of our tickets are bought from Coventrians. So that leaves about 36%, about 68,000 tickets that we've had from people outside Coventry. So it has been really difficult for us to deliver, and actually the programme that we were delivering changed as well. So we delivered a programme for the first 2-3 months that was specifically designed to appeal to Coventry audiences, because our first our first plan was to get as many people back into the city as we could that already live here. However, the two major programmes that David and Martin have both spoken about the Real Store, which we're aiming to get 151,000 people through the doors in the first year of its existence, and Assembly Festival Garden, which had 80,000 people come last year. We're hoping that will be considerably more this year. We've got some big opportunities to be bringing some visitors in. There's also just finally the broadcast programme. So we shifted to deliver quite a lot of our work online and through broadcast with Sky Arts and BBC. And I see those really as an investment in visitor numbers of the future. So people are able to see Coventry on the big screen and then are looking at it as a viable visitor destination going forward. So that'll be something really important to us going into legacy as well. I don't know, Martin, if you've got anything else to add there.
I think it's maybe worth also noting that, that during this period, the city has established its new independent destination management organisation, and this is really an opportunity to build on what has been started. There's a bit of unfinished business to be done during this next period in terms of making sure that we do get some visitors. Or increased number of visitors over this next period. There's also looking ahead what opportunities come from the Cultural Legacy Programme, what come from Commonwealth Games, and indeed the city's wider event strategy. So I guess we've started, we've got a bit of catch up to go. There's no doubt the visitor numbers are much reduced compared to what was imagined, but it feels like because we've taken this long-term impacts approach that will make up business in due course, but the building blocks are in place for us to do so, I think.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, and just on the sort of the legacy impact of investment, I think, tying into what Martin and Laura have said, there's a really significant events programme across this year. So as Martin highlighted, the fact that Coventry is a host city for the Birmingham 2022 Commonwealth Games. We're also hosting International Children's Games within a few days of the Commonwealth Games finishing, and hosting a Rugby League World Cup game. So the presence of the city as a visitor destination and a leisure destination is very significant. The monitoring and evaluation continues beyond the City of Culture year. So we will be undertaking local research with things like our household survey. So through deliberate choices, but also we're fortunate that Coventry is a very data-rich city. So our household survey was a really good baseline for us in terms of understanding local resident understanding, awareness of City of Culture, and also views of impact and contribution that it has or hasn't made. That will continue through our next iteration of the household survey, but we're also commissioning some longitudinal footfall studies through mobile phone data, for example, which will take us through from baseline through the pandemic period into recovery, into delivery and legacy. So we'll have consistent data sources that we can utilise through the evaluation reports that will come, and clearly we'll be tracking ongoing investment and the performance of the city through the destination management organisation as well. And part of that again was visitor survey information. So we found a lot about the city out through some initial tourism survey research, and it's intended that will complete as well in order to baseline some of that change over time.
Thank you, David. Any more questions from anyone? Councillor Grinsell, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. It's really interesting, this actually, arts and culture, as I've taken on the portfolio for Solihull. So I just want to ask you about, you said you've reached communities, but do you really feel that you've reached all communities? Because arts and culture is not something that is always freely available to all, especially deprived communities. So I'm just wondering on that side if you feel you have managed to reach everyone. The longevity of jobs, obviously when we're putting in funding, we can create jobs now. Will they be the jobs of the future? And is there longevity in those jobs, or will they finish? And I suppose you've still got some way to go because obviously you've had to shift the dates. Is there anything you're now changing in the last part of the programme as we come out of COVID that you can perhaps implement that you haven't been able to do previously? And sort of, was there anything that you really learnt that people liked or didn't like out of the whole arts and culture spectrum? Yeah, Dave, will I pick up some of those yet?
Yeah.
So the community reach question is a great one, and I'm really proud of what the team have done and our city partners in terms of ensuring that this reaches those parts of the city who have been under-resourced or those seldom heard communities who've been platformed. We've just published our interim report, our 6-month report actually, and it's a really good read in terms of that reach. It's an independent report put together by the 2 universities on behalf of the trust and then overseen by DCMS, and it absolutely is demonstrating that those communities who are ignored or seldom heard are absolutely at the forefront of what we're doing. Also, more than 50% of our tickets have been taken up by the categories of residents with the 3 most deprived categories in our city. So massive kind of uptake of engagement in a way that we wouldn't expect. We set a target that everybody in the city would engage 3 or more times during the City of Culture year. But what we recognised that, you know, levels of engagement before City of Culture were not equal. Some areas of the city might be able to engage multiple times and others 0. So our piece was make sure everybody gets up to 3 or more engagements. And therefore that means we've designed a delivery model, which means we have producers who are working in faith spaces, community spaces, schools, health centres, libraries in those communities. And so not creating just a city centre events programme, that was absolutely our starting position. So I'm feeling confident. How you sustain that is the biggest challenge in terms of a legacy, and of course our legacy structure is being designed in a way that we continue to invest in those communities in that way. Longevity of jobs, another great question. There's no doubt that there's a short-term boost from City of Culture in terms of you build a team, you put new people into organisations as they grow. Sustaining them will be a challenge. But I guess what we've been doing is trying to build enough skills work and sector development and apprenticeships and leadership programmes and all of those other activities so that people have skills that have been developed to create other jobs going forward. We've also been investing in startups and scale-up activity to ensure that businesses can create new jobs as well going forward. And then I guess big projects like the Digital Gallery and indeed all of this capital investment are creating new spaces, new venues for where jobs will be required. But there is no doubt that is a risk in terms of longevity, something we have to be really mindful of. But I'm hoping we've put enough in place that means that many of them will be sustained. And then in terms of changes around the programme, I mean, I guess what we now have is an opportunity to be about to go back outdoors again, which is brilliant. So we've got hopefully through the worst of COVID and we can start gathering in large numbers. We haven't really been able to do that to date. And so the programme over this next period is about gathering people in spaces, about encouraging visitors to explore lots of different areas of the city, but we're now in a position where we can now have crowds, and that hasn't been possible really up till now. So that's the bit that we're really looking forward to, is getting people outdoors again and in big numbers, because that's what's been missing up to date.
Thank
David,
you.
anything else on that?
No, I think you covered that well, Martin. Happy to take questions.
Councillor Simpkins, please.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you've done and what you've achieved, but I want us to put it into the context of the combined authority, because each local authority will be chasing that cultural and that economy. How do we in the combined authority have a strategic plan for that offer? I noticed on the paper the other day we've got something on the Black Country Museum that fits into the offer. The other thing I would like to ask Coventry is, how much civic pride, and it's probably difficult for you to gauge, did you then come back about from the citizens and residents of Coventry? That's something keen for us in Wolverhampton to do, especially in the Jubilee year, and that gives us the momentum to carry on that, and then hopefully people start to take ownership of their own cities and their own space. That's really important for us.
Thank you.
Can I pick the first one up in terms of the strategy stuff? Yeah.
I've got some good anecdotes about civic pride at the end as well.
Yeah, great. Yeah. So I agree. We need to kind of think, well, how do we take what we've learned from Coventry and make sure that is then shared across the patch? And of course, our monitor evaluation work will do that. But also, I'm not sure you're aware, I chair the Cultural Leadership Board for the Combined Authority, which has representation from right across the whole region. And actually, we have a specific Black Country working group, which is working with the City Combined Authority and indeed Arts Council England and other funders to ensure that, I guess, our ways of working from City of Culture can also kind of influence how others might work. We're currently, as a Combined Authorities Cultural Leadership Board as well, working on a prospectus, which effectively is the start of a strategy. But what we're clear is that we're not going to have an overarching strategy, recognising that each of the areas across the Combined Authority have different priorities. But we hope that City of Culture has been able to demonstrate that good investment in arts can have an impact on other policy areas, and we would hope that other local authorities could pick up from that as well. David, you also sit with the Cultural Officers Group as well, don't you, in terms of the Combined Authority? Maybe pick up on that, and then we'll come on to the Civic Pride piece.
Yeah, sure. So I think there is a real kind of demonstration piece here, really, in terms of the way that culture is transforming our civic spaces, and certainly from a city council perspective, we created a cultural strategy which was approved a month before the bidding process for City of Culture opened, because we wanted to kind of make a clear statement around the value and importance of culture in our locality, and also set some goals whether we did or didn't prove to be successful in the bidding process for City of Culture. So we're currently going through a process to refresh the action planning around that, because clearly a huge amount has been achieved across the board. But as Martin said, there's areas that we still need to focus on, and areas that that have maybe not yet been achieved in a 10-year strategy that we're only halfway through. So absolutely right that we refocus that. We're doing that in partnership with colleagues. So we've collaborated with Birmingham around the review of compacts, cultural compacts, and see that as an important leadership piece in our city, but also working closely with the Business Improvement District and others in the city around our kind of city leadership and the role of culture in regenerating our city centres, but also, as Martin said, our community engagement and involvement. That will get picked up in part through our surveys. So a lot of our data will tell us how people are feeling. I mean, clearly there's a significant amount of anecdotal evidence at this point. So certainly from a city council perspective, I've stood in some of those spaces that have received public realm investment and been approached by local people who've the very day we opened for the Coventry Moves. And I think the other important thing is it's also recognising, as Martin said, that was a period when people were coming out of their houses really at the first sort of part of coming back into the city and realising that the city had been transformed. And actually that's been very powerful. I've had people stop me in the street, ask if I work for the council, and say the city's looking good. And that, to be fair, that doesn't always happen. So that's been a really transformative experience. I think you can see it and you can feel it, that there are new spaces in the city that people have taken pride in. So some of the informal play spaces, the fountains, the picnic areas are populated with people most days of the week, places that were not significant spaces in the city centre previously, and people take a pride in that, and I think that's evident. So I think the challenge is that as the city centre lifts, that, as Martin said earlier, that needs to be felt, and we need to sustain that sense of engagement and involvement and hope in our communities too. But I think the initial evidence is very strong that has absolutely built civic pride. It's a place that people are proud to show, and certainly when we've had our city hosts sort of showing visitors and delegates around the city, they've taken great pride in doing so.
So, Laura, do you want to talk about our sentiment analysis work? Because this is our monitoring evaluation work is capturing kind of civic pride as part of this as well, yeah?
Yeah, of course. It's one of the metrics that we monitor closely. So we've just finished the second wave of our independent sentiment analysis. So we've rang a representative sample of Coventry residents and asked them a series of questions, one of which was about civic pride. 75% of those called strongly agreed the City of Culture will increase their pride in the city among the people who live there. And then what we also do is we send a survey to everybody that attends our events, and everybody that attends our events has fed back, and 74% of them agree or strongly agree that the event they attended increased their pride in Coventry. So about 75% of people that are engaging with us or aren't engaging with us, some of them won't be on this sentiment analysis call, agree that it's increasing civic pride. So as well as all the anecdotal evidence that we get every day, there is some data behind that as well, and that will continue as we go through the final months of the year.
Thank you. Paula, on the screen.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Slay. Just to add in a couple of points, just on the civic side, yeah, we can concur with that, with the feedback that we've had through a number of surveys that we've ran through the Growth Hub. But probably on the business investment side, I would certainly say in terms of the volume, the quality of media coverage that we have been able to secure in the Sunday Times on the back of the, for example, on the back of the events and the almost the momentum that has built over time, obviously since the launch last May. So we have definitely seen a sort of a palpable move in the type and quality of media interest, both nationally and internationally, I would say, in relation to Coventry. And just to sort of prove a case in point, I'm a born and bred Coventrian, and I can tell you, not just anecdotally, fact, the city feels, looks, acts, behaves, and is changed and is different. So yeah, you get two for the price of one there, supporting all the things that that David, Martin and Laura have said.
Thanks for that, Paula. Okay, well, I think that draws it to a conclusion. So Martin, David and Laura, thanks very much for the presentation, and the board have welcomed that. And hopefully now that COVID is a little bit behind us, you might start seeing the visitor numbers increase, and we wish you well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on the agenda, excluding the press and public, I therefore pass the following resolution. In accordance with section 184 of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting due to consideration of the following items of business, as they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information related to business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding the information.